"Tell me, what painting is that?" mocked the prince at the maid. "That painting is fake, my lord." Before we begin this beautiful period romance story, tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I love knowing where you're joining me from. The palazzo stirred like a restless creature, preparing for an evening of polished smiles. Servants hurried in quiet currents, carrying trays, unfolding embroidered linens, polishing objects the nobility barely noticed. Isabella Conti moved among them with practiced calm. Her hands were steady, her step light, her expression composed, though her pulse raced every time she crossed the grand hall. She knew where she belonged, and she reminded herself not to look too long in any direction, especially not upward. But today her eyes rose of their own accord. Above the marble fireplace, where the entire lineage of Vercelli glory should have watched over the room, hung a painting that gnawed at her. Its lines were wrong, its signature was wrong, its shadows, its supposed elegance, its boast of value, they all felt false. She wiped the silver frames arranged on the mantel. Her wrist moved in quiet circles, but her mind spun with unwelcome certainty. She wanted to ignore it. She wanted to be the kind of maid who saw nothing and said nothing. But her late father's voice, steady and patient, lived somewhere inside her, whispering the truths he once taught as gently as he breathed. He had warned her against false brushstrokes long before life warned her against false kindness. Footsteps entered the hall, loud ones, confident ones, the kind that made other footsteps scatter. Prince Leonardo di Vercelli strode in, wearing the easy arrogance of a man who never had to consider lowering his voice. 3 young noblemen followed him, their laughter ringing off the walls. They spoke of horse races or the weather, or the newest rumors from Milan, nothing of consequence, but every word carried the weight of privilege. One of them noticed Isabella first. He nudged Leonardo's arm with a grin. "Even the servants prepare for your triumphs, Your Highness." Leonardo's eyes drifted lazily across the hall until they landed on her. He did not recognize her. She was new enough to remain nameless to him, but something in her stillness caught his attention. Or perhaps it was simply that he enjoyed testing how far a frightened servant might bow. He slowed his steps. "You." His voice carried amusement, nothing more. "Look up." She obeyed, only because not obeying would cause more trouble. He pointed to the painting above the fireplace. "Tell me, what painting is that?" A simple question, delivered with mockery so smooth the nobles chuckled behind him. A maid was expected to blush, stammer, and hide behind lowered eyes. Isabella felt the pressure of that expectation wrap around her like cold iron. She heard the other servants freeze at the edges of the hall. She could have simply murmured, "I do not know, my lord." It would have ended everything, but her father's voice whispered again, "Truth is not arrogance, Isabella. It is dignity." She inhaled softly and met Leonardo's gaze, steady and respectful. "That painting is fake, my lord." The hall fell silent, as if every window had sealed shut. Leonardo blinked once. A faint smile tugged at the corner of his mouth, but not the pleasant kind. It was the slow, curious smile of a man deciding whether he'd heard correctly. "What did you say?" Her heart hammered, but her voice held. "The painting, my lord, it is not authentic." Another nobleman snorted a laugh, but it died when Leonardo raised one hand to silence him. "You are a maid," Leonardo said quietly. "Your task is to polish the frame, not judge what hangs in it." "I understand, my lord," she answered, "but you asked me a question, and you gave me an answer you should not know." Her hands tightened around the cloth in her fingers. She forced her shoulders to remain still. "I only spoke the truth." Leonardo stepped closer, his boots echoing across the marble. He was not angry yet, rather intrigued and slightly offended that anyone had dared to complicate his idle moment. "And what truth is that?" he asked, his voice low. "Enlighten me." Her breath wavered. She felt dozens of eyes watching her, waiting for her to crumble, to regret, to retract. But she had said the words, and she could not pretend she had not. "The composition imitates Maestro Rinaldi's early work," she said softly, "but the brushstroke lacks his precision. The signature is wrong, the varnish is too new, the perspective line along the horizon bends unnaturally, and the shading around the foreground figure—" Leonardo cut her off with a quiet laugh. "Enough." The humiliation in his voice was sharp. Nobles exchanged uneasy glances. No one contradicted the prince, not in public, not ever. Isabella bowed her head, yet she did not step back. "Forgive me, my lord. I spoke too much." Indeed, he murmured. Far too much. He circled the fireplace, studying the painting with sudden seriousness. His amusement faded as he stepped closer to the frame, examining it as though seeing it for the first time. The silence stretched, punctured only by the crackle of the fire. One of his companions whispered, "Surely she is mistaken." Leonardo ignored him. Isabella waited, her throat tight. She wished, with every beat of her heart, that she could pull the words back. She had survived months in this palace by keeping her head down. Why had she failed today? Why had she answered him so plainly? Because he asked, and because truth had been her father's religion. After a long moment, Leonardo turned to her again. "Who taught you such things?" "No one taught me, my lord." It was not precisely a lie, but close enough to sting her conscience. He studied her with sharper interest. "What is your name?" "Isabella Conti, my lord." "Conti," he repeated slowly, tasting the name as if testing it for hidden meaning. "And how long have you worked here?" 6 months, my lord." He nodded once, still thoughtful. "You speak with certainty, Isabella Conti." "Too much certainty for a maid in my hall." She felt the words like a threat wrapped in velvet, but before she could defend herself, the palace steward hurried into the hall, sensing trouble from the way everyone stood. He bowed quickly. "Your Highness, forgive any disturbance. The household staff will ensure the maid—" Leonardo lifted a hand to silence him. "No, I will hear her." The steward's eyes widened. No noble ever insisted on hearing a maid. That alone was irregular enough to strike fear into Isabella's chest. Leonardo stepped closer, his expression unreadable. "Tell me precisely, Isabella Conti, what led you to identify this painting as a forgery? Speak carefully." "My lord," she swallowed, "I only recognized what my father once showed me. He admired Maestro Rinaldi's work." The nobles exchanged glances. The steward's face paled. Leonardo caught the shift in the room. "Your father was a scholar," she answered quickly. "But he ended his years in quiet anonymity, my lord. He had no title, no influence." It was true enough, if incomplete. Leonardo's gaze sharpened even more. "A scholar of what?" She hesitated. "Of art, my lord." A hush fell again. Leonardo's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He turned back to the painting and studied it more intently than before, tracing one fingertip along the frame. "Then perhaps we should examine it." The nobles murmured with unease. The steward almost stepped forward to protest, but one look from Leonardo silenced him. Isabella felt the air thin in her lungs. She had not intended to draw the prince into examination. She had simply spoken before thinking of consequences. She wished she could step backward, but her feet would not move. Leonardo reached for the frame, lifting it from its hook. The weight surprised him. The wood was lighter than it should have been. He frowned. "Fetch a lantern," he ordered his companions. A servant rushed to bring one. Leonardo held the light behind the canvas, exposing the weave. He narrowed his eyes. "This texture is modern." The hall buzzed with whispers. Leonardo lowered the lantern, passed it to a nobleman, and turned to Isabella again. "Who authenticated this piece when it was purchased?" The steward stammered. "The curator of the Royal Gallery, Your Highness. He verified its origin last year." Leonardo let out a slow breath. "Did he?" None of the nobles dared respond. Leonardo's voice dropped to a tone colder than before. "Isabella Conti." "Yes, my lord. I dislike being contradicted." His words were soft, but the warning beneath them was unmistakable. "Yet I dislike incompetence even more." She bowed her head. "I meant no disrespect." "Perhaps not. But you have started a matter I now intend to resolve." The nobles shifted uncomfortably. The stew of tension, curiosity, and wounded pride thickened in the hall. Leonardo stepped nearer, too near. She felt the pressure of his presence, the intensity of his scrutiny. "Tell me something," he said quietly. "When you looked at that painting, what made you so certain you were right?" "The truth was clear, my lord." "To you, perhaps, but truth is rarely welcome in places like this." She dared lift her eyes. "I understand." "No," he said softly. "I doubt you do." He studied her so long that her breath faltered. Then, slowly, he placed the painting on a nearby table and turned back to her. "I asked you once," he said, "but I will ask again. Explain yourself, girl. Now." The steward stood frozen, uncertain whether to intervene or pray the moment would pass on its own. Isabella felt the weight of every stare pressing against her back. The nobles waited for her to crumble. The servants waited for her to apologize, and Leonardo waited for something he had no right to expect, an explanation she could not safely give. She drew a breath, careful and slow. "My lord, I only recognize the faults in the painting because my father once spoke of such things. Nothing more." Leonardo frowned. "Your father taught you to identify forgeries?" "He taught me to recognize honesty in art, my lord." "Honesty," he repeated, as if the word offended him. "You imply our palace lacks it." She shook her head quickly. "I imply nothing, my lord. I answered because you asked me. You should have known better." She lowered her gaze. "I know that now." The nobles exchanged glances, half expecting Leonardo to dismiss her on the spot. The prince studied her for a long moment that stretched until her lungs ached. He seemed torn between irritation and something else. Curiosity, perhaps, though he concealed it well. At last he stepped back. "You may go." She bowed at once, heart pounding. She hurried toward the service corridor, but the steward caught her arm before she could escape fully into the refuge of shadow. He hissed under his breath, "What possessed you, girl?" "I answered the prince's question," she whispered. "You answered it like a scholar, not a maid. The palace thrives on obedience, not expertise. I never sought expertise." "Then stop displaying it," he warned, "or you will lose your place." She nodded quickly. The steward released her, and she disappeared down the corridor with barely controlled steps. As soon as she reached the quiet of the servants' wing, she pressed her hands against her eyes. Her father's lessons, the ones she treasured, were now the very thing threatening her survival. She had sworn not to speak of them. She had sworn to bury them. A soft voice pulled her back. "Isabella? Are you well?" It was Emilia, the kitchen maid, her apron dusted with flour and her expression full of worry. Isabella managed a faint smile. "I am well." "That is not true," Emilia said. "Everyone is whispering. They say you embarrassed the prince." "I did not mean to. Intent does not matter here, only appearance." Emilia squeezed her arm with concern. "Stay quiet. Keep to your tasks. Let today be forgotten." "I hope it can be." But Isabella doubted it. Words once spoken could not be swallowed back, and the prince was not the kind of man who ignored insults, even those unintentionally given. Back in the grand hall, Leonardo remained near the table where the painting rested. The nobles waited for him to speak, yet he seemed lost in thought. His fingers drummed lightly against the wooden frame. One of the young men finally ventured, "Surely, Your Highness, the maid was mistaken." Leonardo did not immediately respond. He traced a fingertip along the edge of the canvas. "Perhaps." The nobleman pressed again. "Maidens often speak boldly to appear clever. She may have repeated something she overheard." Leonardo turned his head sharply. "And yet none of you noticed the faults she named, did you?" The nobleman fell silent. Another laughed nervously. "Surely we cannot rely on a maid's opinion in matters of art." Leonardo's eyes were cool. "I rely only on evidence." He lifted the lantern again and held it behind the canvas. The weave glowed faintly. Light seeped through places it should not. He muttered, "The varnish is indeed modern." The nobles exchanged uneasy looks. Leonardo continued examining the painting in silence, the careless arrogance from before replaced by a peculiar tension. He was not accustomed to being contradicted, but he was far less accustomed to discovering he had been wrong. The steward approached cautiously. "Your Highness, I assure you the curator verified this piece. The acquisition records stand." Leonardo answered without looking up. "Then the curator will explain himself." The steward bowed. "I will summon him at once." "Do so." The nobles murmured among themselves, gossip already forming. Leonardo paid them no attention. He was thinking of Isabella's steady voice, her poised certainty, the complete absence of fear in the moment she spoke the truth. That calmness unsettled him more than her accusation. One nobleman leaned close to him. "Surely you will reprimand her." Leonardo did not reply. The nobleman objected softly, "Your Highness, if you permit this, the servants will think they can speak against the household. It will create disorder." Leonardo finally turned, his tone cold. "Disorder arises from deceit, not honesty." The nobleman stepped back in surprise. The prince's temper was unpredictable, but rarely did he defend a servant. Leonardo exhaled slowly. Enough. Leave me. The nobles bowed and retreated, whispering as they left. The steward lingered for instructions, but Leonardo dismissed him with a wave. When the hall finally emptied, the prince stood alone with the painting. He lifted it again, checking the corners, then the back. He brushed his thumb along the surface near the frame and felt a faint ridge beneath the varnish. Something was hidden there. He narrowed his eyes. He pressed more firmly, and a small piece of varnish flaked away. Beneath it was a faint seal, barely visible but unmistakable. A circular mark, pressed into the wood by someone who wanted it concealed. He muttered under his breath, "What is this?" He set the painting down and leaned closer, examining the tiny emblem. It was simple, discreet, and old. He recognized the motif at once. His father had shown it to him years ago, the mark of a painter who vanished decades earlier. A man rumored to have created works for the royal family, then disappeared without explanation. Why would his seal appear on a forgery? Why would it be hidden rather than displayed? Leonardo straightened slowly, the weight of the question sinking in. At that exact moment, footsteps approached the hall. The steward reappeared, flustered. "Your Highness, the curator is unavailable. He left the palace earlier today on an errand," Leonardo answered sharply. "On whose command?" I do not know." "Find him." "Yes, Your Highness." When the steward left again, Leonardo remained motionless, staring at the painting. The sense of unease grew heavier. He was not a fool. Coincidences did not exist in a palace like this. If the curator had fled, he had done so because he feared something. Leonardo lifted his gaze toward the service corridor where Isabella had disappeared. He replayed her brave answer in his mind. She spoke with precision. She analyzed details he himself had overlooked. "A maid should not possess such knowledge," he whispered. "Who are you?" Isabella spent the rest of the afternoon in quiet tasks, doing everything in her power to remain unnoticed. She polished candlesticks, sorted linens, and tidied the small reading alcoves used by noblewomen. Every time footsteps approached, she tensed. Every time a door opened, she prepared for reprimand. By evening, the whispers had grown loud enough to fill the corridors. Servants passed her with sideways glances. Some pitied her. Some judged her. Most wanted distance from the girl who dared speak truth in the wrong place. Emilia found her again near the scullery. The dowager princess heard what happened. Isabella felt the blood leave her face. "No, she demanded the prince punish you." Isabella's hands trembled around the tray she carried. "Has he?" "No, not yet." "Not yet," Isabella repeated with dread. Emilia looked toward the upper floors, her eyes wide. "Stay silent tonight. Do not leave the servants' quarters. And pray the prince forgets you." But Isabella doubted he would forget. The prince did not strike her as the kind of man who ignored mysteries. She had become one, without meaning to. As evening deepened, the palace prepared for the night's gathering. Music drifted through the halls. Footsteps echoed up the staircases, and the nobility arrived with the typical flair of wealth and entitlement. Isabella worked quietly in the background, serving wine and refreshment, carrying trays that grew heavier with each hour. She kept her gaze lowered. She did not approach the grand hall unless ordered. Even then, she moved quickly, wishing to appear invisible. Yet her invisibility did not last. Near the end of the gathering, as she passed a doorway with a stack of empty goblets, she heard the prince's voice, low, frustrated, unusually tense. He stood speaking with the dowager princess. Leonardo's tone was controlled but colder than before. "Mother, I will not dismiss her," the dowager replied sharply. "She insulted you publicly. She answered a question honestly. Her honesty reflects poorly on our household." Leonardo exhaled sharply. "The painting is a forgery that reflects poorly." Isabella froze. She had no right to overhear, but she could not move. The dowager's voice grew quieter, heavier with authority. "You owe the palace order. A maid cannot contradict a prince. Punish her before others follow her example." Leonardo did not respond at once. The silence stretched painfully. Finally he said, "I will consider it." The dowager left. Leonardo stood alone, his jaw tight. Isabella shrank back into the shadows, terrified she might be seen. The gathering ended, Music faded. Nobles departed. Servants rushed to clean. Isabella kept close to the corners, trying to breathe through the knot of fear tightening inside her. She hoped the night would pass without further attention, but just as she reached the safety of the servants' staircase, a guard stopped her. "The prince requests your presence." Her breath stilled. "Now?" "Now." She followed him through quiet halls, her steps small and uncertain. The guard opened the door to a side chamber near the gallery. Leonardo stood inside, hands behind his back, staring at the forged painting resting on a table. He did not turn when she entered. "Isabella Conti." "Yes, my lord." "You embarrassed me today." She swallowed. "Forgive me, my lord." "And yet," he finally looked at her, "you may have saved this palace from a larger deception." She stared at him, stunned. He approached her slowly, his expression unreadable. "We will discuss your conduct, your knowledge, your past." She felt the room spin. He stopped close enough that she felt his presence like heat. "But before we speak of any of that, I must know this." He lifted the painting with one hand and held it between them. His voice dropped to a sharp whisper. "Who in this palace is trying to deceive me?" Isabella stood very still, her breath thin in her chest, her eyes fixed on the forged canvas the prince held between them. She had no answer that would satisfy him, and every possible reply felt dangerous. She shook her head slowly. "I do not know, my lord." Leonardo searched her face, as if he could find truth hiding beneath her skin. "You spoke with certainty earlier. Your confidence was not that of a maid guessing at shadows." She lowered her gaze. "Certainty about art is not certainty about people, my lord." "Convenient distinction," he said. "Yet I wonder." He set the painting on the table and stood in front of her. She felt the pressure of his attention like heat. She clasped her hands tightly to keep them steady. "My lord," she whispered, "I only spoke because you asked me." "I did," he admitted. "And now I regret asking. You put me in a position I did not expect. I never meant to." "But you did." He paced once as if trying to shake off his thoughts. "Your knowledge is too precise. You spoke as if you had studied art all your life." She swallowed. "My father taught me to look closely. He taught you more than that." She did not argue. She could not argue. Silence pressed around them like a tightening rope. Leonardo finally stopped pacing. "Today, after you left the hall, I tested your claims. Every flaw you named, it was correct." He looked sharply at her. "How did you see them so quickly?" She hesitated longer than she should have. "Practice, my lord." "Practice," he repeated with disbelief. "From what life does a maid gain practice evaluating fine art?" "A life far behind me." "I do not care about your past," he said impatiently. "I care about the palace in which we stand. That painting is not the only forged one." She looked up sharply. "You are certain?" "I examined 2 more pieces in the gallery. They show similar inconsistencies." His tone was cold now, stripped of the earlier irritation. "Someone has infiltrated my family's collection. Someone with knowledge. Someone with access." Her breath tightened. "But why?" "That is what I intend to uncover." He stepped closer again. "And you, Isabella Conti, will help me." She felt the world tip beneath her feet. "I cannot, my lord." "You can, and you will." "You saw what none of my curators noticed." "My lord, I am only a maid." "Enough," he cut in. "You are not a maid when you speak of art. You become something else entirely. And I must know why." She took a step back, but the chamber felt too small. "My lord, if I help you, people will talk." "Let them. Your mother already—" "My mother fears whispers more than truth," he snapped. "I do not." She bowed her head quickly. "Forgive me. I spoke out of turn." He let out a frustrated breath. "No, Isabella. You spoke as you always do, with inconvenient honesty." She did not know what to say. She simply stood in silence, hands clasped, heart pounding. Leonardo's voice softened unexpectedly. "I do not know whether you are a blessing to this palace or a complication I do not yet understand." He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "But I do know this. Someone is lying. Someone has placed forgeries under this roof, and you notice before anyone else." She met his gaze, fear and something else stirring inside her. "I only want to keep my position, my lord. Nothing more." "That depends on how you answer what I will ask next." Her throat tightened. "What is your question?" He held her gaze for several seconds before speaking. "Your father. Who was he, truly? Her breath caught. A scholar, she whispered. Leonardo's eyes narrowed. A scholar of what? Art. And nothing more, my lord. He did not look convinced. Your father would not have taught his daughter so much, unless he intended her for a life far beyond servitude. She pressed her lips together. Life changes. Circumstances change. Dreams fade. And knowledge? Leonardo asked quietly. Does that fade too? She shook her head. No, my lord. Then stop pretending you do not possess it. The air grew still. The fire in the corner crackled once, the only sound in the chamber. Leonardo exhaled, then stepped back. Enough for tonight. You may go. But you will report to me tomorrow after the morning duties. She blinked. Report to you? Yes, he said. I want you to examine the paintings stored in the archives, all of them, every single piece. She felt her heart drop. My lord, that would take hours. Then you will spend hours. If anyone sees me there, no one will see you unless I allow it. My lord, that is not a request. She lowered her head, her voice almost a whisper. Yes, my lord. He nodded once. You may leave. She turned toward the door, relief tempting her forward. But just as her hand touched the handle, Leonardo spoke again, his voice low. And, Isabella, she froze, if you know anything at all, about who might be involved in this, you must tell me. She looked back at him, sincerity burning in her eyes. I know nothing of that, my lord. He studied her long enough to test the truth in her voice. For the moment, he accepted it with a small nod. She stepped out into the corridor and made her way back to the servants' wing. Her steps were careful, as if each one could collapse under the weight of her fear. When she reached her small room, she leaned against the door and let out a slow breath. Her hands shook. Her mind raced. Tomorrow she would step again into the world she had sworn never to touch. A world of canvases, secrets, and memories she had spent years burying. She lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, unable to stop replaying the prince's questions. She feared what he might discover, not because she had done wrong, but because the truth of her past was tangled with sadness she could not face. Morning arrived in a blur of exhaustion. She rose before the others, dressed quietly, and joined the servants in their routine tasks. She scrubbed, polished, arranged, and carried, all while dreading the moment the steward would appear. And he did. He approached with a stiff expression. The prince requests you. Requests. As if there were any choice. She followed the steward through the winding corridors to the archive rooms where the oldest paintings were stored. He opened the door and gestured for her to enter. The archive was dim, filled with rows of easels and canvases stacked against the walls. Dust floated in the air. Silence pressed down like a heavy cloth. Leonardo stood near a long table, several paintings already arranged for examination. He dismissed the steward with a nod. Good morning, he said. Good morning, my lord. He studied her briefly, noting the faint shadows beneath her eyes. You did not sleep. I slept enough, my lord. That is clearly untrue. She did not answer. Leonardo stepped back and motioned to the first painting. Begin here. Tell me everything you see. She moved toward the canvas, hesitant at first, then steadier as her familiar instincts returned. She examined the brushstrokes, the texture, the signature. Words flowed from her, careful, precise, restrained, but undeniably confident. Leonardo listened with growing wonder. You identify style as easily as breathing. My father once said the soul of a painter cannot hide, she murmured. And you believe that? Yes. He stepped closer. Then what does this painting tell you? It is genuine, she said after a moment. The style matches perfectly, the signature is natural, and the aging is authentic. No forgery would mimic the uneven cracks here. He nodded. Next. One by one she analyzed the paintings. Hours passed in a strange rhythm, her voice steady, his questions sharp. Her fear faded into concentration, though anxiety lurked beneath every motion. Near midday, Leonardo asked, Did your father teach you to paint? She froze. No, my lord. Not even a little. No. Did he work for a noble family? No. Did he ever deal with the royal gallery? She hesitated. Not directly, but indirectly. She said nothing. Leonardo's gaze sharpened. You paused before answering. Why? No reason, my lord. Isabella. His voice grew firmer. I need the truth. She turned away before he could read her expression. My lord, may I continue with the paintings? He paused, then nodded. For now. They reached the last canvas. She examined it slowly, carefully, as if afraid to speak. Leonardo sensed her uncertainty and stepped closer. Well, he asked. She forced her voice steady. This one is troubling. Troubling how? The style is correct, she said. The materials are correct, but the signature feels forced. Leonardo frowned. Forced? She nodded. Someone tried too hard to imitate the original artist. Much too hard. Leonardo exhaled sharply. Another forgery. Yes, my lord. He paced in tight circles, agitation breaking through his composure. This is no mistake. This is deliberate. Someone is replacing originals with copies. She watched him, fear creeping into her chest. My lord, what will you do? I will confront the curator. He must explain how these pieces entered the palace under his supervision. But he fled yesterday. Then he will be found. As if summoned by the very thought, the steward burst into the archive room, breathless and pale. Your Highness, he gasped. You must come at once. Leonardo turned sharply. What is it? The steward swallowed hard. A new discovery, my lord. Another painting has been examined. And this one... He took a shaky breath. This one is confirmed to be a forgery as well. Leonardo stared at him, disbelief sharp in his eyes. Which painting? The one in the grand entry hall, Your Highness. Isabella felt her pulse stop. The steward stepped forward, voice trembling. The forgery was placed there very recently. Leonardo did not waste another breath. He strode out of the archive room with such force that the steward nearly stumbled trying to stay ahead of him. Isabella followed without being asked, her steps small and quick, her heart pounding so loudly she feared he could hear it. The corridors buzzed with whispers. Servants moved aside as the prince passed, eyes low, mouths tight with fear of what might unfold. No one dared speak aloud what everyone was thinking. If someone was bold enough to place a forgery in the grand entry hall, then the deception was no longer a hidden act. It was a challenge. When they reached the hall, the painting had already been removed from the wall and placed on a stand near the base of the staircase. Several nobles had gathered at a polite distance, pretending to converse while their glances kept darting toward the prince. Isabella kept her gaze down. The room felt too bright, too exposed. Leonardo approached the painting, jaw clenched. Who discovered it? A footman stepped forward, visibly shaking. I did, Your Highness. I noticed the varnish looked too fresh, the color too... Leonardo cut him off with a sharp gesture. He turned to Isabella. Well? She swallowed, then stepped closer to the canvas. Her eyes scanned the surface quickly, her body remembering its old habit of careful inspection, even as her mind screamed to stop. Her voice was quiet, but steady. This one is also false, my lord. Painted by someone intent on imitating the original artist, but with too perfect a hand. The work lacks the natural imperfections that come with time. Leonardo did not look at her. He stared at the painting as if it had personally betrayed him. This was my father's favorite. A noblewoman gasped behind them. Another whispered a prayer. Isabella felt the intensity of the prince's anguish, though he hid most of it under his usual composure. He turned abruptly to the steward. Summon the curator. Now. The steward hesitated. Your Highness, the curator is still missing. Then find him, Leonardo snapped. Drag every river and every tavern if you must. The nobles flinched at the sharpness in his voice. The steward bowed and hurried away. Leonardo faced the nobles with a cool, controlled expression. This matter is under investigation. Until it is resolved, no one touches any piece of art in this palace. His gaze hardened, and no one speaks of this outside these walls. The nobles nodded quickly, murmuring their obedience. Isabella stood behind him, silent as stone. She wished she could disappear into the floor, but her fate seemed tied to this mystery, whether she welcomed it or not. Leonardo turned back to her. Come with me. She followed him into a smaller chamber connected to the hall, one with high shelves filled with books and ledgers. He closed the door behind them, trapping the two of them in a tense solitude. Tell me, he said, facing her, How long have you truly known about these practices? These tricks? These subtle details you name so easily? I learned them years ago, she whispered. From your father, yes. Leonardo stepped closer. What sort of scholar was he? What did he write? Who did he work for? She hesitated. He worked independently. That is not an answer. It is the truth. He studied her carefully, his eyes dark with suspicion he did not wish to feel. Your presence in this palace suddenly appears less accidental. She flinched. My lord, I had no intention of entering your world. I only sought work to survive. Yet you were placed in this palace. This palace, where a forgery scheme is unfolding under our noses. Isabella's breath caught. You think I had something to do with the forgeries? He held her gaze, and she felt the full force of his scrutiny. No, he said finally. If you wished to deceive us, you would never have spoken in the hall, not publicly, not boldly. Relief washed through her, though fear remained. I promise you, my lord, I know nothing of these acts. I believe you, he said softly. But someone is using your knowledge, your father's knowledge, to manipulate this palace. She looked pale. My father never wished to harm anyone. I believe that, Leonardo replied. But someone knew his reputation. Someone knew what he studied. And someone is exploiting that. She swallowed hard. My father's name was dragged through disgrace after a scandal involving forged paintings. That is all I know. Leonardo's expression sharpened. A scandal. She closed her eyes briefly, wishing she could push the memories away. Yes, my lord. And you did not think to mention this sooner. It was not my secret to share. It is a sorrow I wished forgotten. But past sorrows rarely stay buried. She looked up at him helplessly. What else can I say? He took a step back, pacing once, struggling with the storm inside him. You can tell me every detail of your father's life, every person he taught, every acquaintance he had, because I fear your father's past is not behind you. It is standing right in front of us. She clasped her hands tightly. My father taught only me, no one else. That cannot be. It is the truth, she insisted. He paused, his expression softening. You speak with such pain. Why? She turned her head away, unable to hold his gaze. Because speaking of him brings back memories I spent years pushing behind me. Leonardo remained silent for a long moment, the weight of her vulnerability pulling at him in ways he did not expect. He had been raised to see servants as distant figures, faceless helpers, but Isabella stood before him with a heart so exposed he could not look away. He sighed. Sit, she obeyed, sinking onto a wooden bench near the bookcase. Leonardo sat across from her, elbows resting on his knees. Tell me about the scandal, he said. I will not judge. I only need to understand. She looked down at her hands, twisting a ribbon from her apron. My father was hired to authenticate a series of paintings for a wealthy patron. He declared several of them forged. The patron disagreed. My father refused to retract his judgment. The man accused him of incompetence. Soon after, another painting appeared, supposedly one my father had authenticated years earlier, proven to be a forgery. My father insisted he had never seen that painting before, so he was framed, Leonardo said quietly. Yes. And the world believed the lie. Yes, she whispered. He lost his credibility, his patrons, his livelihood. We moved often after that. He grew ill, and before he died, he begged me to hide my knowledge so the past would not follow me. And yet here we are, Leonardo murmured. Tears filled her eyes, though she blinked them back stubbornly. I only wanted work. I never wanted to touch art again. Leonardo leaned back, folding his arms. Someone knew your father's reputation. Someone knew you carried his knowledge. And someone is using it to create confusion in my household. But how? She asked. I told no one of my father. I told no one of his disgrace. Secrets have a way of leaking, Leonardo said, especially in palaces. She pressed a hand to her forehead. My lord, I swear I have done nothing wrong. I know, he said softly. Silence hung between them, heavier than before. At length, Leonardo rose to his feet. We must confront the curator. He may hold the answers, but he is missing. Which is why we will not wait for him, Leonardo said. We will search the archive records ourselves. Isabella stood slowly. You want me to help you again? I need you, he corrected. She froze, stunned by the words he quickly softened with a faint shake of his head. I need your eyes, your knowledge, your truth. My lord, she whispered, if your mother discovers I am assisting you. My mother has no authority over my investigations. But she holds the authority of the palace. His jaw tightened. I will handle her. He opened the door, gesturing for her to follow. Come. The archives hold more secrets than either of us realized. She stepped through the doorway, her feet carrying her toward a future she feared but could no longer avoid. They walked together through the corridors, avoiding busy sections of the palace. Leonardo moved with purpose. Isabella followed with dread, knotted in her stomach. When they reached the archives again, he closed the door behind them and lit a second lantern. He pulled out a stack of ledgers. These contain the acquisition records for the past 10 years. Isabella ran her fingers over the covers. My father's scandal was nearly 15 years ago. Then someone is using old knowledge to mask new crimes, Leonardo replied. Help me find the pattern. They opened the ledgers side by side. Page after page revealed lists of paintings, dates, prices, signatures, and names of authenticators. Leonardo pointed to one entry. This is the painting from the entry hall, bought 8 months ago, authenticated by the curator, delivered by a northern dealer. Isabella frowned. That dealer's name appears several times. Leonardo flipped pages rapidly, finding the same name. 3 times in 1 year. And each piece he delivered belongs to the same collection. Leonardo stiffened. My father's personal collection. They exchanged a sharp look. Someone is targeting your father's legacy, she whispered, replacing his favorite pieces with false ones. And the curator helped them, Leonardo said. Or someone pressured him, Isabella thought, but she did not dare say it aloud. Leonardo shut the ledger with a loud thud. This is deliberate, calculated, and personal. A soft rapping suddenly echoed from the corridor. Leonardo turned sharply, motioning Isabella behind a shelf. She hid quickly, heart pounding. The door creaked open. A servant appeared, bowing deeply. Your Highness, forgive the intrusion. What is it? Leonardo demanded. The servant swallowed. The Dowager Princess requests your presence at once. Leonardo's expression darkened. For what purpose? She did not say, my lord. Leonardo hesitated. Tell her I am occupied. The servant's voice trembled. My lord, she insisted you come immediately. Leonardo clenched his jaw, considering. Isabella waited in silence, hidden behind the shelf. Finally, Leonardo answered, Very well, I will go. The servant bowed again and left. Leonardo turned to where Isabella hid. Stay here. Do not speak to anyone. Touch nothing else. She nodded. He opened the door, preparing to step into the corridor. But before he left, he paused and looked back at her, his voice low. This matter is unraveling faster than I expected. Someone in this palace is manipulating everything we know. She swallowed hard. My lord, what should I do if someone comes? He hesitated. His voice dropped even lower. Do not trust anyone but me. He stepped out, closing the door behind him. Isabella stood alone in the dim archive room, staring at the cracked painting on the table, her breath shallow, her heart racing. The silence closed around her like a tightening trap. Then she noticed something she had not seen before. A folded piece of parchment tucked between 2 frames on the nearest shelf. Her blood ran cold as she reached for it with trembling fingers. She unfolded it slowly. It was a note, written in her father's hand. And at the bottom, in words that shook her to the core, it read, Do not trust the prince. Isabella stared at the note until her vision blurred. The handwriting was unmistakable. Her father's firm strokes, the slight slant to the right, the careful spacing, she knew them as well as she knew her own breath. But her father had been gone for years. Every letter he ever wrote had been lost during their last move. She herself had burned the final ones to keep anyone from discovering his name. Yet here one sat in her trembling hands. Her throat closed. She touched the ink, expecting it to smear like a cruel trick, but it held solid beneath her finger. The words felt alive. Do not trust the prince. The room seemed to tilt. She backed away from the shelf, gripping the note too tightly. A dozen questions burned through her thoughts. Had her father written more letters she never found? Had someone stolen his writing? Or was this some ploy designed to push her into fear and obedience? The last possibility struck her hardest. Someone wanted her scared. Someone wanted her isolated. Someone wanted her doubting Leonardo. A door creaked in the corridor. Footsteps approached. Isabella spun around, heart racing, and shoved the note inside her sleeve just as the archive door opened. Marco, one of the footmen, poked his head in. His surprised expression hardened into disapproval when he saw her alone. "The prince told me to check on you." She forced her voice steady. "I am fine." He stepped inside and folded his arms, eyeing the canvases around them. "You should not be here without a supervisor." "I was following orders." "So you say." His tone carried an edge she had never noticed before. She stepped back, trying to read his expression. Marco had always been polite, distant but respectful. Today he looked at her as if she were a problem he had been sent to solve. "Where is the prince?" Isabella asked, hoping the question sounded casual. "With the dowager. And I imagine he will not be pleased when he learns you are wandering." "I am not wandering. I am waiting where he told me to." Marco walked toward her slowly, as if inspecting her. "You have become very bold lately." "I do only what is asked of me." He looked at the table, studying the forged canvas. "And yet somehow trouble follows you." She tightened her hands behind her back to hide their trembling. "If the prince is finished with me, I will return to my duties." Marco did not step aside. "Isabella, there are eyes everywhere in this palace. People speak. They say you have caught the prince's attention." "I have not," she whispered, "and that is fortunate, because attention from those above you leads to ruin. Do you understand?" "I understand my place," she said, though the words stung. He nodded slowly, but his expression held no satisfaction. "Good. Then remain in it." He walked out without another word. As soon as he left, Isabella exhaled shakily. She leaned against the nearest shelf and closed her eyes. Her sleeve felt heavy, as if the note were a stone dragging her downward. "Do not trust the prince." Her father would never have written such a warning. He had believed in truth, not mistrust. But the signature, the strokes, they were identical. Someone had copied his hand, or someone had preserved his writing for years. She forced herself to breathe. The prince would return soon, and she needed clarity before facing him again. She reached into her sleeve, pulled out the note, and stared at it a moment longer. A soft clatter sounded behind her. She stiffened. "Who's there?" No answer came. She walked toward the far shelves. A stack of ledgers had fallen to the floor. Nothing else. No one else. A draft slipped through the crack beneath the door. She tried to steady her nerves. She picked up the ledgers one by one, returning them to their shelf. As she lifted the last one, something slipped out, a folded piece of parchment, yellowed and thin. She caught it before it hit the floor. Another message. Her hand trembled as she unfolded it. The words inside chilled her to her bones. "Everything you uncover will destroy you." Her breath stilled. She crushed the page in her fist, unable to bear the threat. 2 notes, 2 warnings, no signature, no explanation. Someone was watching her, and they wanted her terrified. The door swung open with a loud crack. Isabella jumped, hiding the second note behind her skirt. Leonardo entered, closing the door behind him with unusual force. His jaw was set, his eyes storm-dark. "My mother is furious," he said, walking across the room. "She believes the palace is under attack by unseen hands." Isabella swallowed. "Was she angry with you?" "She was angry at the world." He rubbed his temple. "And she suspects you." Her stomach dropped. "Me?" Leonardo stopped in front of her. "She believes your knowledge is too convenient." Isabella's voice wavered. "I did not ask to know any of this." "I know," he said. His tone softened. "I told her that. But she does not believe you." Leonardo hesitated. "My mother believes what protects the palace's reputation. If accusing a maid keeps her worldview intact, she will do it." Fear chilled Isabella's skin. "What will she do next?" "I do not know." He stepped closer. "You must be careful." She lowered her head. "My lord, I fear someone is trying to frighten me." Leonardo paused. "Frighten you?" She nearly revealed the notes, nearly showed him the handwriting that twisted her heart, but the warning echoed in her mind. Do not trust the prince, and she could not bring herself to disobey a voice that wore her father's hand. Instead, she said quietly, "Yes." The servants whisper. They watch me. Leonardo's expression hardened. "I will put a stop to that." "No," she said quickly. "If you defend me, they will only speak more." He studied her a moment, then nodded reluctantly. "Very well. But if anyone threatens you, you will tell me." She opened her mouth, then closed it. Her silence created a weight between them he did not understand. Leonardo exhaled and moved toward the paintings. "The curator's disappearance troubles me. I believe he fled because he feared being discovered, or because someone told him to," she murmured. Leonardo turned sharply. "What do you mean?" She regretted speaking. "Only that anyone involved in replacing paintings would not want him questioned." Leonardo nodded slowly. "True." He picked up one of the forged canvases. "These are too skillful to be the work of an amateur. Whoever painted them understands the masters intimately." Isabella swallowed, "as my father did." Leonardo looked at her with sudden clarity. "Isabella, is it possible someone who knew your father is behind this?" She shook her head firmly. "My father had no friends." "No friends?" Leonardo repeated in disbelief. "He was respected once, but after the scandal everyone abandoned him. All except me." Leonardo studied her face, as if imagining the life she described. After a long moment he set the painting down. "Let us search the acquisition ledgers again," he said. "Perhaps we missed something." She nodded and followed him to the table. They opened the biggest ledger, its pages crackling softly. Leonardo scanned a column of names. "This dealer," he said, "Barzoni of Turin. He sold 3 paintings to my father, and now 3 of his deliveries appear to be forgeries." Isabella frowned. "Barzoni worked with my father briefly." Leonardo stiffened. "How do you know that?" She hesitated. "I saw letters addressed to him years ago." Leonardo tapped the ledger. "Then Barzoni may know more than he admits. We could question him." "We will," Leonardo said. "Tomorrow, I will send riders to Turin." Before Isabella could answer, footsteps sounded outside. Leonardo instantly put a finger to his lips. She fell silent. Voices drifted through the corridor, low, urgent whispers. One belonged to the steward, the other. Isabella's blood chilled. The second voice belonged to the dowager princess. Leonardo motioned for Isabella to retreat behind a tall cabinet. She did so quickly. She pressed her back against the shelves and clutched her sleeve where the first note hid. The door opened. The dowager stepped in. Leonardo bowed. "Mother." She looked around the room slowly, her expression composed but sharp. "There are matters we must discuss." He met her gaze. "Then speak." She stepped closer. "I have learned something troubling. The curator is not missing." Leonardo stiffened. "Where is he?" "Fleeing north," she said, "with assistance from someone inside this palace." Leonardo's eyes narrowed. "Who?" The dowager paused. "A servant girl." Isabella's heart slammed against her ribs. Leonardo snapped, "Impossible!" The dowager folded her hands. "I say what I was told. She has been communicating with the curator secretly, passing messages, and she has knowledge of art she should not possess." Leonardo's voice turned to ice. "And who gave you this information?" "A loyal servant," she said. "One who has served us for many years." Leonardo stepped closer. "Mother, someone is lying to you." "Perhaps." Her eyes glittered. "Or perhaps someone is lying to you." Leonardo's jaw tightened. "Her name—" The dowager lifted her chin. "Isabella Conti." Isabella pressed a hand to her mouth to silence her gasp. Leonardo's response came immediately, sharp and unwavering. "I will not hear another accusation against her without proof." "There will be proof," the dowager replied, "because I have ordered her quarters searched." Isabella's knees weakened. The dowager stepped closer to Leonardo. "And when we find her correspondence with the curator, you will see that she has deceived you." Leonardo said nothing. Then the dowager dropped the final blow. "I have also ordered the servants questioned. One has already confessed that Isabella has been hiding letters in her room." Isabella felt the blood drain from her face. Leonardo's expression darkened, fury rising beneath the surface. But the dowager princess continued, her voice soft and deadly. "And when those letters are found, my son, Isabella Conti will answer for them. Leonardo stood frozen, disbelief tightening every muscle. The dowager's words hung in the air like smoke choking the room. Isabella pressed herself further against the cabinet, afraid even her breathing might betray her. The dowager knew nothing of her presence, yet her shadow stretched long and heavy across Isabella's fate. Leonardo finally spoke, voice low and dangerous. "Mother, who told you such lies?" "A servant," the dowager replied evenly. "One who has witnessed her suspicious movements." "Name him." "No. His loyalty deserves protection." Leonardo exhaled sharply. "I know all the loyal servants in this palace. None would invent a story without reason, unless someone compelled him." The dowager's gaze sharpened. "You suggest I would coerce my own staff?" "I suggest someone is manipulating you," Leonardo said, stepping closer. "Someone who fears discovery more than truth." She raised her chin. "Do not dare accuse me of blind judgment." "Then show me proof." "It will arrive," she said, her voice cold. Leonardo's jaw worked with frustration. "Mother, if you drag a maid into an accusation this severe without evidence, you risk damaging the palace far more than any forgery ever could." The dowager's eyes narrowed. "I fear the opposite. I fear that Maid has already damaged you." Leonardo stiffened. "Explain yourself." "Your attention to her is becoming visible," she answered. "Servants talk, nobles whisper, and whispers grow into stories faster than you imagine." Leonardo's voice settled into a tone like steel. "You concern yourself with gossip while forged paintings sit in our halls. Forged paintings can be concealed. Rumors cannot." Leonardo shook his head. "Mother, you misjudge me." "No," she replied, soft but firm. "I fear I know you better than you know yourself." He stepped back, unwilling to continue the argument. "If you have nothing further, there is more," she said, interrupting him. "Much more." Leonardo's eyes narrowed. The dowager folded her hands slowly. "An anonymous warning was delivered to me this morning. It claimed Isabella Conti has knowledge of the curator's whereabouts." Leonardo's expression darkened. "Show it to me." "I burned it," she said. "You what?" His voice rose before he lowered it again. "I will not keep a slanderous letter in this palace." Leonardo stared at her, incredulous. "Mother, how am I to judge the truth if the evidence disappears before I see it?" "I shred poison before it spreads," she answered, "or before anyone can learn who planted it." The dowager's expression tightened, offended. "Leonardo, I am doing what must be done to protect this household." "You are being manipulated," he insisted. "Someone is turning suspicion away from themselves and toward an innocent woman." "Then let time prove who is innocent." Leonardo closed his eyes briefly, as if gripping patience with both hands. "I will not allow Isabella to be punished without undeniable proof." "She is a servant," the dowager replied, unflinching, "and servants are easily replaced." Leonardo snapped his eyes open and stepped closer, fury simmering beneath the surface. "She is not easily replaced." Silence dropped like a stone. The dowager's eyes widened a fraction. "I see." Leonardo realized his mistake too late. The implication in his tone was unmistakable. The dowager stepped back slowly, studying him now with a mixture of concern and calculation. "I had hoped the whispers were false," she said quietly. "I see now I hoped in vain." Leonardo stiffened. "My feelings are irrelevant. Your feelings," she said carefully, "are precisely the danger." He exhaled sharply. "We are done here." She gave him a long, searching look. "Do not let her drag you into ruin." She left without another word. The moment the door shut, Isabella sagged against the cabinet, her breath escaping in a shaky rush. Leonardo turned at once, searching the room. "Isabella," he said quietly, "come out." She stepped into the open, eyes lowered. She felt disoriented, her mind repeating the dowager's last sentence again and again. "Do not let her drag you into ruin." Leonardo walked toward her slowly. "You heard." She nodded faintly. He studied her, frustration shadowing his features. "My mother is mistaken. She acts out of fear. She acts out of love for you," Isabella said softly. "I cannot fault her for that." Leonardo blinked, surprised by her calmness. "You should defend yourself, Isabella. You should protest her words." "What defense do I have?" she whispered. "I am a maid." She is a princess. You are not a criminal, yet someone wants me to appear as one. Her voice cracked. She clasped her hands together to hide their trembling. Leonardo's expression softened and he stepped closer. Isabella, he said quietly, I will not let anyone harm you. She looked away, unable to meet the intensity in his eyes. I fear harm is already on its way. Someone is placing these false letters. Someone who knows too much. Leonardo's eyes locked on hers. Letters? Her breath stilled. She had not meant to say it. Leonardo stepped closer. What letters? She shook her head quickly. Nothing, my lord. Forget I spoke. I cannot forget, he said, voice firm. Tell me what letters. She hesitated, torn between fear and trust. A knock cut through the tension. Leonardo and Isabella turned sharply as the door creaked open again. This time the palace steward entered, breathless. Your Highness, he gasped, the Dowager requests your presence at once. Leonardo's jaw tightened. For what reason now? There has been an incident, the steward said, in the servants' wing. Isabella froze. Leonardo stepped forward. What incident? The steward hesitated, looking between them. Leonardo's voice sharpened. Speak, the steward swallowed. Your Highness, it is Isabella's room. The floor seemed to disappear beneath Isabella's feet. Leonardo moved toward the steward immediately. What about her room? It is being searched. Leonardo's face darkened. On whose command? The Dowager's, my lord. She ordered a full inspection. She fears letters are hidden there. Isabella's breath broke. My lord, I keep nothing. Leonardo raised a hand gently. Isabella. I know. The steward continued, voice trembling. But the guards have already begun, and something has been found. Leonardo froze. Isabella's stomach turned cold. What was found? Leonardo demanded. The steward lowered his voice. Several letters, written in a man's hand, addressed to Isabella Conti. Isabella felt the blood drain from her face. She could barely form words. That is not possible. The steward shook his head. They were under your mattress. Leonardo stepped forward, voice tight with fury. She did not place them there. The guards say they bear her name. Leonardo snapped. Anyone could write her name. The steward swallowed again. The letters contain details about the curator. Leonardo's eyes widened. What details? That he sought to meet with her, that he feared the palace, that he trusted her. Isabella shook her head fiercely. No, I never received such letters. I never saw them. I would never... Leonardo placed a steady hand on her arm. I believe you. The steward looked genuinely pained. The Dowager is already reading them. Leonardo stiffened. And what conclusion has she drawn? The steward hesitated. She believes Isabella was corresponding with the curator in secret, that she helped him flee. Isabella let out a small, broken sound. My lord, please. Leonardo turned to her, his voice immediate and firm. Do not be afraid. Someone has planted those letters. But who? She whispered. Leonardo's answer came without hesitation. Someone inside this palace. Isabella felt the truth settle like ice in her veins. Someone had forged her father's hand. Someone had copied her name. Someone wanted her blamed. Leonardo looked at the steward. Take us to her room. The steward nodded and led them toward the servants' wing. As they walked, Isabella felt the weight of every watching eye. Whispers rose like wind around them. By the time they reached the corridor, 2 guards stood outside her door. The Dowager Princess emerged, holding several folded letters in her gloved hand. When she saw Isabella, her expression hardened. Leonardo stepped in front of Isabella at once. What have you done? The Dowager demanded. Leonardo answered coldly. Mother, show me those letters. You will see them, she said sharply. You will see how deeply you were deceived. She held out one of the pages. The handwriting was identical to the first note hidden in Isabella's sleeve. Her father's hand. Leonardo's voice dropped to a whisper edged with danger. Mother? Where did these letters truly come from? The Dowager stiffened. From her room. From her own bed. Then someone placed them there. And who would do such a thing? Leonardo leaned in, voice cold as frost. The same person who fears she will uncover the truth. The Dowager's eyes narrowed. Are you accusing me? I am accusing whoever benefits from her silence." The dowager opened her mouth to retort, but before she could speak, a palace guard ran down the hallway at full speed. "So, Your Highness," he shouted, "we found him." Leonardo turned sharply. "Found who?" "The curator, my lord." Leonardo froze. The guard's next words cut like a blade. "He is in the north corridor, asking to confess everything." Leonardo did not waste a heartbeat. "Where is he now?" "In the north corridor, Your Highness," the guard said, still breathless. "Under guard. He insists he will speak only with you." Leonardo turned to Isabella. Her fear was raw, but her gaze steady. She did not hide behind him, though the corridor bristled with accusation. He felt a sharp jolt of admiration, quiet, unwelcome, but undeniable. "Come," he said gently. "You will hear his confession as well." The dowager took a step forward. "Absolutely not." Leonardo faced her. "Mother, she stands accused. She has the right to hear what he says. She is a servant. She is a witness." The dowager's jaw tightened, but Leonardo didn't wait for her permission. He motioned to the guard. "Lead the way." They walked quickly through narrow halls, past tapestries and polished sconces, into quieter passages where servants froze at the sight of them. Isabella kept pace at Leonardo's side, though her legs trembled with each step. Behind them, the dowager followed, silent, rigid, her eyes fixed on Isabella like a hawk circling prey. At the far end of the corridor, two guards stood at attention. Between them sat the curator, a thin, anxious man with hollow cheeks and trembling hands. He looked up as Leonardo approached, and relief washed through his expression. "Your Highness," he said, voice cracking, "thank the heavens." Leonardo's tone cooled into authority. "You disappeared without explanation. You fled the palace. You avoided summons. And now you return asking for my audience. You will explain every one of these actions." The curator nodded rapidly. "Yes, Your Highness, I will tell you everything. Only, please, allow me to stand." Leonardo motioned for the guards to help him to his feet. Isabella remained near the wall, trying to breathe past the storm inside her. The curator's gaze found her almost immediately. He paled. "Ah," he whispered. "The maid." The dowager stepped forward sharply. "You recognize her?" "Yes," he murmured. "All too well." Isabella stiffened. Leonardo's eyes snapped toward the curator. "Explain." The curator wrung his hands. "Your Highness, I know who she is." "Then say it," Leonardo commanded. "Say it plainly." The curator looked between the prince, the dowager, and Isabella, then spoke in a trembling voice. "She is the daughter of Cesare Conti." Gasps rippled through the corridor. Several servants ducked behind doorframes, listening with wide eyes. Leonardo remained still. "I know that already." The curator blinked in surprise. "You do?" "Yes," Leonardo said. "And I know her father was wrongfully disgraced." "Wrongfully?" The curator let out a bitter laugh. "Is that what she told you?" Isabella stepped forward, voice quiet but firm. "It is the truth. My father was framed." The curator's expression twisted into something fragile and miserable. "Yes, he was." The dowager turned sharply. "Then why did you run?" "Because," the curator said, voice cracking, "the person who framed him is the same person framing her now." Leonardo's breath caught. Isabella felt the world tilt. The corridor fell silent, except for the curator's shallow breathing. Leonardo spoke first, voice low. "Who?" The curator flinched. "Someone powerful. Someone I was foolish enough to obey." "Name them." The curator swallowed. His hands trembled violently. "Your Highness, I cannot. If I speak their name, I will not leave this palace alive." Leonardo stepped closer, expression hard. "You will speak. Now." The curator closed his eyes as if gathering courage for an unbearable act. But when he opened them again, terror filled his gaze. "No, Your Highness. Not here. Too many ears. Too many eyes." Leonardo exhaled sharply. "Then follow me. We will speak privately." "No," the curator said quickly. "I will speak only in the presence of those already entangled in this misery." He pointed to Isabella. "Her, only her. She must hear the truth." Leonardo's expression hardened. You will not speak to her alone. She has the right to know, the curator insisted. And she is in grave danger. The dowager stepped forward, voice sharp as glass. She is a servant. She requires no explanations beyond what the prince deems suitable. The curator's expression turned desperate. You do not understand. If she is not told the truth now, she will be destroyed. Her father's ruin will become hers. Isabella felt the breath leave her chest. Please, she said softly. Tell us. Leonardo placed a hand on her arm, steady and warm. Isabella, if this man means to harm you further, she shook her head. I need to know. The curator took a shaky breath, looked at Leonardo again and spoke carefully. Your Highness, I did not flee the palace because of guilt. I fled because I was warned. Leonardo's eyes narrowed. Warned by whom? The curator swallowed. The same person who is planting letters in the maid's room. The same person who forged her father's hand. The same person who placed false rumors in your mother's ear. The dowager stiffened. You will watch your tongue. The curator ignored her. Fear drove his words now, not caution. This person told me my life was worth very little if I stayed, and they told me that the girl, Isabella, would suffer next. Leonardo took a step closer, voice lethal in its calm. Enough riddles. Name them. The curator shook his head violently. Not in this corridor, not out loud. If I speak the name carelessly, all of us will be ruined. Leonardo looked ready to force the answer from him, when the curator suddenly sagged, leaning against the wall for support. He pressed a hand to his temple, breathing hard. Your Highness, he whispered, I will tell you everything, but only where it is safe. Only where no one can overhear. Leonardo nodded shortly. Then we will move to the west storeroom. It is locked, guarded, and unused. But the curator shook his head again. No, not the storeroom. That room contains too many entrances. Leonardo's frustration grew deeper. Then where? The curator's voice dropped to a whisper. The chapel. Leonardo blinked. The chapel? Why? The curator straightened slightly, though fear continued to tremble in his bones. Because the walls are thick, the door is heavy, and no servant will enter without cause. It is the only safe place in this palace. Leonardo hesitated. The corridor watched him, guards, servants, the dowager, everyone waiting to see what he would decide. He turned to Isabella. Stay close to me. She nodded, her heartbeat so loud she felt it in her fingertips. Leonardo addressed the guards. Escort us to the chapel. No one else is to enter until I command it. Yes, Your Highness? The guards answered in unison. The curator began to walk, guided between them. Leonardo and Isabella followed. The dowager remained rooted in place, tension tightening every line of her posture. This is reckless, she warned. You are letting a maid and a disgraced curator pull you into darkness. Leonardo did not turn back. Mother, stay here. The dowager took a step forward, anger flashing in her eyes. Leonardo! No. His voice echoed through the corridor, final and immovable. The dowager froze. Leonardo continued walking. They reached the chapel wing within minutes. The tall wooden door loomed in front of them, carved with old symbols and framed by dark stone. The guards opened it. Light spilled through stained windows, painting the floor in muted shapes. The space was empty, silent. The curator entered first, glancing around with wide, fearful eyes. Leonardo and Isabella followed. When the door closed, the echoes swallowed the palace outside. Leonardo turned to the curator. Now speak. The curator's breathing quickened. He stepped toward the altar, as if needing the comfort of something sacred. His voice trembled. Your Highness, Miss Conti, what I'm about to tell you is the truth, the whole truth. I have carried it for years. He drew a shaky breath. It began with Cesare Conti. It began when your father uncovered a secret about the Vercelli collection. A secret so dangerous that someone in this palace decided he needed to be silenced. Isabella's heart slammed against her ribs. Leonardo's expression sharpened. The curator continued. Your father was not merely disgraced, Miss Conti. He was punished because he discovered that someone close to the Vercelli family was commissioning forgeries to replace valuable originals. Leonardo stepped closer. Who? The curator's voice dropped. Someone with access, someone with influence, someone who lived under this roof. Isabella whispered. My father never told me. He could not tell you, the curator said, because before he could reveal the name, he fell ill, terribly ill. Too quickly, Isabella's blood ran cold. No, that is not possible. He was ill from grief. He was poisoned, Isabella gasped. Leonardo's face blanched with shock. The curator raised a trembling hand. And the one responsible, the person who poisoned Cesare Conti and now frames his daughter, he swallowed hard, is still inside this palace. Leonardo stepped forward. Tell me their name. The curator opened his mouth, and a sudden noise exploded in the corridor outside. A shout, a crash, footsteps. Isabella's heart leapt into her throat as the chapel door shuddered violently under a heavy blow. The chapel door shook again, this time with enough force to rattle the lantern hanging near the entrance. Isabella gasped and stepped back, instinctively reaching for the nearest pillar. Leonardo moved in front of her without thinking, his arm slightly extended as if to shield her from whatever pressed against the door. Stay behind me, he murmured. Another loud thud struck the wood. The curator nearly collapsed against a pew. They found us, he whispered. I told you this place was not safe. Leonardo shot him a sharp look. Who is they? Who follows you? Speak, man. Before the curator could answer, a voice rang from the other side of the door, firm, impatient, and too familiar. Prince Leonardo, open the door at once. The Dowager Princess. Leonardo exhaled through clenched teeth. Of course. Your Highness, the Dowager called again, her tone carrying enough frost to chill the chapel's air. You will open this door immediately. The curator sagged in relief. Thank heavens. It is only her. Leonardo turned sharply. Only her. You were trembling as though death itself waited outside. The curator swallowed, eyes darting. Not death, but her guards. Her influence. Leonardo stepped closer. What do you fear from my mother? The curator shut his mouth at once, as if the words had nearly escaped him. Leonardo's eyes narrowed. Another crack sounded against the door. Leonardo! The Dowager shouted. Do not force me to make this an order before the entire court. Isabella stood frozen, her heart pounding. She knew the Dowager did not step anywhere without purpose. Her arrival now meant only one thing. Someone had told her the curator intended to reveal the truth. I must open it, Leonardo said quietly. If I do not, she will bring half the palace here. But if she enters, Isabella whispered, the curator may refuse to speak. He refuses even now, Leonardo replied, his voice low and tense. He speaks in riddles. Leonardo walked to the door and placed a hand upon the iron handle but didn't turn it. He looked back at Isabella. You stay behind me. Do not speak unless spoken to. She nodded tightly, though her throat felt closed. The curator trembled so violently the pew creaked beneath his weight. Leonardo opened the door. The Dowager strode in with 3 guards behind her. Her glance swept the chapel in one swift sweep, taking in Isabella, Leonardo, and finally the curator, who shrank visibly beneath her gaze. I knew it, she said. A secret meeting. A servant. A fugitive curator. My son trapped in the middle. Leonardo stepped forward. Mother, your presence was not requested. The affairs of this palace do not require your invitation, she replied smoothly. Especially when secrets are whispered in holy places. Her eyes found Isabella again. They lingered, cold and sharp. You seem to appear wherever impropriety grows. Isabella lowered her head but said nothing. Leonardo noticed her trembling hands and stepped slightly closer to her without turning his head. Mother, Leonardo said calmly, we are here because the curator insisted on revealing the truth. The Dowager's brows rose. The truth, or his own attempt at survival? The curator lifted his head weakly. Your Highness, I came to confess. You will confess nothing, she said sharply, raising a hand. Leonardo's eyes widened. Mother, silence. Her voice held such authority that even the guards stiffened. This man is unstable, untrustworthy. He fled his duties. He brings disgrace to the gallery and dares return with tales to hide his own corruption. That is not, the curator began. Enough, she snapped. I will not have the integrity of this house questioned by a coward. Leonardo stepped between them. He claims someone inside the palace orchestrated the forgeries, and I claim he lies to shield his own guilt." The curator shook his head frantically. "Your Highness, I speak the truth." "Do you?" the dowager said. "If so, then explain why letters addressed to the maid were found in her room. Explain why your signature appears on forged documents. Explain why you vanished when questioned." The curator's face contorted with anguish. Because you are guilty." The dowager's voice cut like a blade, firm and cold. Leonardo's frustration burst through his calm facade. "Mother, stop. You accuse everyone except the one person who might actually be responsible. And you defend the one person who has no right to your protection," the dowager replied. Leonardo stepped back, stunned. She held his gaze, her voice firm. "Leonardo, you must consider your position. The nobles already whisper that you show undue interest in a maid. I attempt to shield you from shame, yet you walk willingly into scandal." Leonardo's face hardened. "This is not about Isabella." The dowager's eyes narrowed. "You speak her name too freely." He opened his mouth to argue, but Isabella spoke first, softly, calmly, though her voice trembled at the edges. "Your Highness," she said to the dowager, "if my presence brings shame or danger, I will leave the palace. I never wished to cause harm." Leonardo turned to her instantly. "Isabella, no." But she kept her gaze lowered. "I have no place in matters of nobility. If leaving restores peace, I will go." The curator's breath caught. "No, you must stay. If you leave now, the truth will never come to light." The dowager glared at him. "Truth does not tremble like a rabbit. Lies do." Leonardo felt his patience snap. "Mother, you will stop dismissing every word spoken against your comfort." She faced him, eyes blazing. "And you will stop endangering this family for a servant who should never have crossed your path." Silence crashed over the chapel. Leonardo's chest rose and fell with restrained fury. Isabella felt faint. She had never wished to come between a mother and son. The pressure of their conflict squeezed her from both sides. The curator stepped forward, clutching the edge of a pew. "Your Highness, if you do not listen, this will end in ruin." Leonardo turned toward him. "Then speak, now, before another interruption." The curator swallowed. His voice trembled. "The person behind the forgeries, the one who framed her father, the one who plants letters, the one who forced me to flee." Leonardo leaned closer. Everyone in the chapel fell deadly silent. The curator opened his mouth to finally reveal the name, but the dowager lifted one hand slightly, a gesture or a warning Isabella could not tell. The curator saw it and went white as chalk. His voice died. Leonardo's eyes widened, realizing the curator had recognized something in the dowager's gesture. "Who are you afraid of?" Leonardo asked urgently. "Who threatens you?" The curator's lips parted soundlessly. Leonardo stepped closer. "Say it." The curator's breathing turned ragged. His eyes darted between Isabella, the dowager, and Leonardo, as if choosing whom to destroy with the truth. And at last, with a trembling whisper, he said, "It is someone who belongs to the Vercelli household." Leonardo's shoulders stiffened. The dowager's expression did not change. Isabella felt her heart stop entirely. Leonardo's voice dropped into a lethal whisper. "Who?" The curator opened his mouth, but a sudden shout echoed down the corridor outside the chapel. The guards stiffened. The dowager's eyes darted to the door. Leonardo turned sharply. The chapel door flew open before anyone could react. Marco, the footman who had warned Isabella earlier, stood in the doorway, panting, his face flushed with urgency. His voice broke through the heavy silence. "Your Highness, the archives have been breached." Leonardo didn't hesitate. He strode toward Marco so quickly the footman stepped back as if struck by wind. "Breached how?" Marco steadied himself. "The door stands open, Your Highness. Paintings thrown down, ledgers torn." He swallowed. "Whoever did it escaped before the guards arrived." The dowager stiffened. "Impossible. That room is always guarded." "Not today, Your Highness," Marco said. "Someone dismissed the guards by name." Leonardo's eyes widened. "What name?" Marco hesitated, glancing at Isabella before answering. "Isabella Conti." Isabella felt the words hit her like a physical blow. Her knees softened. She steadied herself with the back of a pew. "That is not possible," she whispered. Leonardo shook his head at once. "She was with me the entire time." Marco bowed quickly. "I told the guards as much, Your Highness, But they obeyed the order before they realized the voice did not sound exactly like hers. Leonardo frowned. The voice? Marco nodded. Someone imitated her, or tried to. The dowager's lips curled. Someone is playing a bold game. Leonardo turned on her sharply. Mother, do not twist facts. Isabella was here. She could not have breached the archives. I never claimed she did. The dowager's gaze flicked toward Isabella. But someone wishes the palace to believe she did. Leonardo stepped toward Marco again. Is the archive room still accessible? Yes, Your Highness. I placed guards around the entrance. No one has touched anything since. Good. Leonardo turned to the curator. You are coming with us. The curator shook his head quickly. Your Highness, I have said all I can for the moment. No, Leonardo cut him off. You have said nothing. You promised truth, yet you offer only half sentences and trembling. The curator clenched his jaw, guilt and fear tugging at his features. I cannot name them yet, Your Highness. Not until I know you understand what this conspiracy truly is. Then explain it, Leonardo said. I will, the curator replied. But not here. Not while she is listening. His eyes flicked toward the dowager. Leonardo's pulse tightened. Why not? The curator lowered his voice. Because she holds power I cannot risk provoking. The dowager's brows rose at the implication. You dare insinuate I... Leonardo raised a hand sharply. Enough! His voice echoed through the stone chapel, silencing everyone. He turned toward the dowager with a measured calm. Mother, return to your chambers. I will call for you when needed. The dowager's eyes flared. How you dismiss your own mother in front of servants? I dismiss anyone who disrupts my investigation, Leonardo replied. Rank does not excuse obstruction. Isabella felt the words cut through the air like a blade. The dowager stared at her son, the shock clear even through her composure. Slowly she straightened her posture. Very well, she said. But mark my words, Leonardo. Your mercy will become your undoing. She turned sharply and exited the chapel with her guards. Silence settled once more. Isabella inhaled shakily. My lord, you should not have spoken to her so sternly. Leonardo turned to her. She leaves me no choice, and you are not to worry about her reaction. My lord, she protects the palace. Even if she is mistaken. She is not mistaken, the curator whispered suddenly. She is frightened. Leonardo whipped toward him. Explain. The curator shook his head. Not yet. The archives first. You must see what was destroyed. Leonardo nodded once. Marco, escort us. Marco bowed, still visibly shaken. This way, Your Highness. They moved swiftly through the corridors. Isabella walked between Leonardo and the curator, her eyes fixed forward but her mind caught in a storm. The breached archives, the forged letters, the curator's trembling confession. Someone in the palace pulling every thread tight enough to strangle her. When they reached the archive door, 2 guards stood rigidly at attention. They stepped aside. Leonardo entered first. The destruction inside stole the air from Isabella's lungs. Paintings lay scattered on the floor, their frames shattered, canvases slashed or torn free from their stretchers. Stacks of ledgers toppled across the room like fallen soldiers. Sheets of paper littered the ground, some stamped with old seals, others freshly inked. The lanterns cast ghost-like shadows across the chaos. Leonardo froze in the center of the room, his jaw clenched so tightly, Isabella saw the tension ripple along his temples. Who would dare do this? The curator moved slowly, carefully stepping between shards of broken frames. Someone who fears discovery. Someone who needed time. Someone who wanted my confession delayed. Leonardo turned to Isabella. Stay close. She nodded, unable to speak. The destruction felt personal, as if someone had shattered pieces of her own memory. The curator crouched near a torn ledger and lifted it with shaking hands. Here, he whispered. Look at this. Leonardo knelt beside him. Isabella leaned in. The page listed acquisitions from 12 years prior. Names of dealers, dates of shipments, signatures of approval. But several entries had been slashed violently, ink smeared by hurried fingers. Leonardo touched the damaged page. Someone tried to erase the past, or suppress it, the curator murmured. Marco hovered at the doorway, watching nervously. Your Highness, the servants are restless. They fear punishment. Leonardo straightened. No one will be punished until we know the truth. He looked to Isabella again. And you, his voice softened. You must trust that I will not allow anyone to harm you. She felt warmth rise in her chest, a dangerous warmth she tried to smother. My lord, I am only a maid. You are not. His tone left no room for argument. Not any more. The curator cleared his throat. Your Highness, there is something else you should see. He pointed toward a small box partially hidden beneath a toppled shelf. Leonardo lifted the shelf aside. The curator reached down and opened the box with trembling fingers. Inside lay sealed letters, several of them, some bearing familiar handwriting. Isabella's heart clenched. The curator picked up one with care. These were used against your father, Miss Conti, and now they are being used against you. Leonardo's jaw tensed. You mean forged? Yes. The curator's voice cracked. Every one of them. Isabella took a step back, struggling to breathe. Why? Why do this to my father? And now to me? Because, the curator whispered, your father discovered the scheme, and whoever orchestrated it believed that silencing him would bury the truth forever. Isabella closed her eyes. But if he was silenced, why target me? Because you know too much, the curator said. Even if you do not realize it, she shook her head. I know nothing beyond the brushstrokes my father taught me. And that is precisely what threatens them, he murmured. Leonardo stood slowly. Curator, enough riddles. You said you would tell the full truth once safe. The curator nodded. We are safe enough now. The dowager is gone, the room is guarded, and you have seen what they tried to destroy. He turned to Isabella. His voice softened. It is time you know, Miss Conti, that your father was right. He warned me years ago that the Vercelli collection was being altered. Masterpieces replaced, originals stolen, forgeries commissioned. Leonardo's face darkened. Who? He demanded. Who dared touch my father's collection? The curator exhaled slowly. Not someone outside the palace. Someone within. Then name them, Leonardo said. The curator's voice dropped to a whisper. A nobleman. A man close to your family. Someone with authority. Leonardo stared. Who? Before the curator could answer, Isabella lifted her gaze. Her voice was fragile, trembling. My father. In his final days, he wrote notes, not complete letters, only fragments. But there was one phrase he repeated often. Leonardo moved closer. What phrase? Someone he trusted betrayed him, she whispered. Someone who spoke with the assurance of nobility. Leonardo's eyes hardened. The curator nodded, his expression pained. Yes, your father spoke the truth. His downfall was crafted carefully by one man with enough power to conceal the crime. Leonardo leaned forward. And that man is... The curator raised a trembling hand. Before I name him, I must tell you what happened the night your father died. Isabella felt ice form in her veins. Please, I need to know. The curator swallowed, then spoke carefully, each word chosen with weight. I visited him that night. He warned me he had uncovered proof, documents, signatures, and private correspondences, revealing who masterminded the forgeries. He hid them. He begged me to protect them if he did not survive. Isabella choked on a breath. He never told me. He wanted to shield you, the curator said gently. He feared that if you knew, you would become a target. Leonardo stepped closer to Isabella. Where are these documents now? The curator lowered his head. Stolen. Years ago. Leonardo's eyes narrowed. Stolen by whom? The curator took a deep breath. By the same person who has been tormenting Isabella. The same person who forged the letters. The same person who framed her father. Isabella's voice trembled. Tell us. Marco moved closer, listening without hiding it. The curator lifted his gaze, looking directly at Leonardo. The man behind everything is someone you know well, Your Highness. Leonardo's expression hardened. Who? The curator did not hesitate. Count Ferrante di Roccabruna. Leonardo's breath caught. Isabella's hand flew to her mouth. Marco let out a soft gasp. The curator nodded grimly. He was your father's trusted advisor. He oversaw the collection. He controlled acquisitions, and he feared Cesare Conti would expose him. Leonardo's jaw tightened in fury. Ferrante, my godfather. Yes, the curator said. Your father trusted him. Cesare trusted him. And Ferrante used that trust to destroy him. Leonardo tried to speak, but no words came. The curator continued. Ferrante ordered the forgeries. He replaced originals with skilled copies. He sold the originals in secret. And when your father uncovered his crime, he silenced him. Isabella felt tears fill her eyes. And now he tries to silence me. Yes, the curator said. Everything, every threat, every letter, every accusation leads back to him. Leonardo closed his eyes briefly, as if steadying himself. When he opened them, they burned with fury Isabella had never seen before. He will answer for this, he whispered. The curator nodded. He must. Marco hesitated. Your Highness, Count Ferrante left the palace earlier today. Leonardo turned sharply. Where did he go? To the royal villa outside the city, Marco said quietly. He claimed he needed rest. Leonardo looked at Isabella, determination firm in his gaze. Then we ride at once. But Isabella stepped forward, shaking her head. My lord, she whispered, this is no longer about chasing him, the truth is known. Leonardo studied her face, her tears, her courage, and then he spoke, voice steady and warm. No. Now we prepare to restore your father's honor. Silence filled the room. The curator slowly lowered himself against a shelf, exhausted but relieved. Marco stepped back, unsure whether to celebrate or fear the revelation. Isabella wiped her eyes gently. What happens now? Leonardo offered her his hand, not as a command but as a gesture of partnership. Now, he said, we clear your name before the entire palace. Isabella looked at his hand, her breath trembling. She took it. And for the first time since she arrived at Palazzo di Vercelli, she felt the weight of fear lift from her chest. The curator exhaled in relief. It is done. The truth is finally spoken. And now, the palace can breathe again. Leonardo nodded. Tomorrow Ferrante will face consequences. Tonight Isabella will rest under protection. Isabella managed a small nod. Thank you. Leonardo guided her toward the doorway, but paused. Isabella, he said gently, you are safe now. She closed her eyes, letting the words settle into her heart. He repeated them softly. You are safe. And for the first time in her life, she believed them. Dawn rose over the Palazzo di Vercelli with a quiet that felt almost strange. After weeks of whispers, suspicion, accusations, and danger, the palace finally woke not under fear, but under the first promise of truth. Servants moved with unusual calm. The nobles stayed behind their doors. And in the west wing, Prince Leonardo stood alone at a tall window, waiting for the hour to strike. Today, Count Ferrante would be exposed before the entire court, and Isabella Conti would be cleared. He had barely slept. His thoughts had not left her for a moment. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her face in the archives, pale with fear yet steady with dignity. Every time he breathed, he felt again the warmth of her hand when she accepted his promise of protection. He had made many vows in his life. None had ever felt like that one. A soft knock on his chamber door pulled him from his thoughts. Enter, he said. The door opened, and Isabella stepped inside with the smallest, most hesitant breath. She wore a simple pale gown borrowed from the wardrobe mistress. Clean, modest, freshly pressed. Her hair had been braided with care. She looked nothing like a maid summoned for judgment. She looked like someone stepping into the truth of who she had always been. Leonardo stared, unable to speak for a moment. My lord, she said quietly, stopping a few steps away. The steward told me you wished to see me before. Everything begins. Yes, he answered, his voice calmer than he felt. Thank you for coming. Her hands clasped before her, fingers interlaced tightly. I thought it better than waiting alone. He stepped closer. You will not stand alone today. She looked down, trying to hide the tremor in her lips. Still, I fear what the court will say. Let them speak, he said. Let them watch. They will hear truth, and they will witness justice. She raised her eyes. Your mother will not be pleased. No, he admitted. But I cannot shape my life around her fears. I must act according to what is right. Isabella hesitated, then spoke softly. And what of what they will say about you and me? Leonardo exhaled slowly, as if preparing to open the deepest part of his heart. He stepped even closer. Isabella, I no longer care what story they invent. I care only for the truth we saw together. I care that your father's name is cleared, that you are safe, that the lies surrounding us burn away. Her breath caught. And after that? The question hung between them, a fragile, trembling bridge neither had dared cross. Leonardo's voice lowered. After that, I hope you will allow me to speak to you not as a prince addressing a maid, but as a man addressing the woman who saved him from arrogance and blindness. Her lips parted, but no sound came. He reached for her hand. It shook in his, but she did not pull away. A knock sounded at the door. "My lord," Marco said from the hall. "The court is gathered." Leonardo did not release Isabella's hand, not until he had looked directly into her eyes and said, "Walk with me." She nodded. Together they entered the grand hall. The court filled the room with a thick, unsettled silence. Nobles lined the walls in glittering clusters, whispering behind lace fans and embroidered sleeves. Servants pressed themselves into corners. Guards stood ready at every doorway. The dowager princess sat regally in her high-backed chair, expression carved from stone. In the center of the hall, Count Ferrante stood surrounded by guards. His face betrayed nothing, though his hands moved restlessly behind his back. Leonardo led Isabella forward with quiet firmness. When they reached the center, he released her hand gently, as though placing her into the world with the dignity she deserved. The dowager rose. "Leonardo, this assembly was called to address accusations against a maid. Yet you arrive holding her hand." Leonardo faced her. "This assembly was called to reveal truth." Ferrante lifted his chin. "Then speak it, your highness." "I will," Leonardo replied, "and so will you." A murmur rippled through the court. Leonardo turned toward the curator, who had been escorted inside moments before. "State what you confessed in the chapel." The curator stepped forward, voice trembling but clear. "Count Ferrante commissioned forgeries to replace original paintings in the Vercelli collection. He sold the originals privately for profit. He framed Cesare Conti when the man discovered the scheme, and he framed Isabella Conti to prevent the truth from being uncovered." Gasps filled the room. Ferrante's composure did not crack. Leonardo spoke loudly enough to still every whisper. "Is this true?" Ferrante studied the young prince with calculating calm. "Your Highness, your father trusted me. Your mother trusts me. I have served this family faithfully for decades. Will you throw away years of loyalty because of the ramblings of a frightened curator and a servant girl with a disgraced name?" Another ripple of gossip swept the room. Leonardo replied, "Isabella's name was disgraced by you. I deny the accusation." Leonardo lifted a ledger from the table, a ledger salvaged from the archive wreckage. "This ledger keeps record of the paintings missing from my father's private collection, each one replaced during the same years you oversaw acquisition." Ferrante's jaw tightened. Leonardo held up another record. "This one holds your signature approving shipments that never arrived." Ferrante still did not speak, and then Isabella stepped forward. She did not look at the dowager. She did not look at the nobles. She looked directly at Ferrante. "My father trusted you," she said quietly. "He believed your praise. He believed your friendship. He believed you wanted to protect the art he loved." Ferrante's mouth twitched. "You taught him to share his knowledge," she continued. "You encouraged him to examine pieces that later turned out to be forged. You sent him letters, letters that framed him, letters you planted in his home, letters that destroyed his reputation." Ferrante's composure cracked for a single breath, just long enough for the court to sense there was truth behind her words. Leonardo stepped closer to him. "Confess." Ferrante lifted his head with cold pride. "I will confess nothing." The dowager's voice rose sharply. "Ferrante, I demand the truth." He turned toward her slowly. And in that moment, Isabella saw it, the shift, the small curl of contempt in his lips. "Your Highness," he said to the dowager, "I have protected this family from scandal for decades. Your husband was careless with the collection and trusted fools. I merely ensured the palace survived his mistakes." Leonardo's eyes froze. "My father was honorable." "Your father was naive," Ferrante replied. "And if I had not intervened, his misjudgments would have destroyed the legacy you cling to." The entire hall went silent. Leonardo stepped forward until he stood eye to eye with the man who had been part of his childhood. You poisoned Cesare Conti. Ferrante hesitated. It lasted only a heartbeat, but it was enough. Leonardo spoke quietly, every syllable cutting through the room. Guards, take him. Ferrante froze as 2 guards seized him. He straightened his shoulders, but his voice shook slightly. You will regret this, Leonardo. No, Leonardo said. I will regret only that I did not see the truth sooner. The guards led Ferrante out of the hall. Silence lingered, heavy and trembling, before the dowager princess slowly turned her eyes toward Isabella. For the first time there was no anger in them. Only the dawning realization that the woman she had feared was nothing more than a victim of a crime committed under her own roof. The dowager spoke softly. Isabella Conti. Isabella lowered her gaze respectfully. I misjudged you, the dowager said. Gravely. Isabella did not speak. She felt no triumph. Only the deep, trembling relief of a burden finally lifting. Leonardo turned to her with a softened expression. Isabella, the court awaits your dismissal or your restoration. Which do you choose? She looked at him in surprise. My lord, the choice is yours. No, he said gently. It must be yours. You may leave this palace forever if that brings you peace, or you may stay in a role that suits your true worth, not the role that hid you. She hesitated, overwhelmed, but her heart knew the answer. Slowly, she lifted her eyes to his. I wish to stay, she whispered. The court erupted in whispers, but Leonardo's expression brightened with unmistakable warmth. Then stay you shall, he said. Her breath trembled. As what, my lord? Leonardo took a step closer, voice low enough for only her to hear. As the woman whose courage changed this palace, and as the woman I wish to court, openly, her breath caught, Leonardo. He reached out, not boldly, not arrogantly, but with care. If you will allow it, he said. Her eyes softened with tears she fought to contain. I will. The court sensed the moment, though no one dared speak. The dowager closed her eyes briefly, accepting the inevitable. The servants exchanged hopeful smiles. Leonardo offered Isabella his arm. She took it, and the grand hall seemed to draw breath in awe. He led her toward the center of the room, as if presenting her not as a maid, not as an outcast, but as someone who finally stepped into the light she deserved. When they reached the foot of the dais, Leonardo turned to face her fully. Isabella Conti, he said softly enough that only she heard. Your father's honor is restored, your name is free, and my heart is yours, if you will have it. Isabella trembled, fear, wonder, and joy blending into one breathless feeling she had never known. My lord, she whispered, I never imagined someone like you could ever. He leaned closer, his voice warm. Someone like me. Isabella, I am only a man, and I have loved you from the moment you dared to speak truth in a room full of fear. Her tears finally fell, quiet and shining. And I have loved you, she whispered, from the moment you listened. Leonardo's hand reached for hers, threading their fingers gently, reverently. Their joined hands trembled between them. The court watched. The dowager bowed her head, and Isabella felt her father's memory lift her heart. Leonardo spoke one last time, his voice soft, steady, and promising a lifetime. Walk beside me, Isabella, not behind me. She nodded, tears warm on her cheeks. Yes, always. He drew her into his arms, not in a bold embrace, but in a quiet, tender closeness made of gratitude, devotion, and a future unfolding at their feet. And in that sunlit hall, before the court that had once judged her, Isabella Conti lifted her head, not as a maid, not as a suspect, but as the woman the prince loved. And the palace finally breathed in peace. Thank you so much for listening to this story all the way to the end. We hope it moved you as much as it moved us while telling it. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave us a comment telling us where you're listening from and what you liked the most. Rate this story from 0 to 10. What score would you give it? If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like as a show of support. That really motivates us to keep creating and sharing more stories full of emotion and life lessons. And before we go, we want to remind you that an exciting and heartwarming story recommendation will appear on the final screen. If you'd like to enjoy it, just click on the video. Thank you once again for being here, and we'll see you in the next story.